Hi, I'm Kara and welcome to Camp, where college applications are made perfect. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the two main college application portals that you are going to be using as you apply to college, and we're going to walk through them together step by step. The first is the Common Application. So the Common Application you will use for pretty much any school in the United States, both public and private universities. The second is ApplyTexas, which you're going to use for schools specifically here in Texas, such as schools in the UT system, Texas A&M, Texas State, schools like that. We're going to go through these things together, but don't forget there are always additional resources linked in the description box below, along with timestamps so you can skip to specific topics. Let's get into it.
Okay, so we are going to begin with the Common Application. So when you first sign into the Common Application, you're going to have a dashboard that looks something like this. As you can see, here are all of the colleges I applied to this past year. Instead, I'm going to walk you through this little tab right here that says Common App. So My Colleges is where you can add colleges and then do their specific tasks. But to even begin that, you're first going to want to fill out the basic information on this Common App tab. So the first section is your profile. So it's going to be a lot of personal information, which is going to be pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I really want to note here is when you get to demographics. So you are almost certainly going to want to indicate a religious preference, because many colleges will look at this when they're thinking about their demographics and the different pools that they're pulling from. Even if you think, oh, this might be a religion that hurts me in the college application process, or if you're not religious, there is an option to indicate that, and I would almost certainly make sure that you go ahead and do that when you are doing this application. Same thing with the indication of your ethnicity. I would go ahead and do that even if you're white and you're like, oh, this is going to hurt me in my college application. I would still do it. It is always nice just for colleges to know. And sometimes if you don't do that, colleges will see you as trying to shirk something like affirmative action and will look a little bit less favorably upon that. So I would go ahead and fill all of that out. The only other thing I really want to talk about here is the Common App fee waiver. So this is if you have a fee waiver already, and this is going to be generally for lower income students. If you don't think that you have a fee waiver, or you're not sure, but you think probably not, you probably don't have a fee waiver. It would be pretty clearly communicated to you if you did have a fee waiver or if that did apply to you. The next thing we're going to look at is the Family tab. So this is just about your parents, and I'm going to highlight one of my parents specifically. I'm going to talk about my mom here. I'm going to show you how I filled out her thing, because it can be a little in-depth. So this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. The suffix is only if they're like a junior or a third or something like that, so you're most likely going to leave those alone. This section is the section I wanted to discuss, this section with the email and the phone number. So if you do give this information to colleges, just know they will contact your parents. I cannot count the number of times I had my mom's email in here and she would forward me emails like, oh my gosh, did you see this? Because your parents generally are pretty curious about where you're going to go. And if you put in the email, colleges will email them in order to try and get them involved. So if that's something you don't want, then I would leave email and phone blank. If that's something you don't really care about, or your parent really wants you to do that, then go ahead and do that if that's what you want. But just be aware that by putting in this email and this phone number, you are giving colleges essentially permission to contact your parents and to talk to them about recruiting and things like that. This is a little more involved. So this is the occupation. You have to put employment status, position title, if they're employed at a college, name of their employer. Same with the school. So my mother got a master's degree, so I had to put in both of the colleges that she attended. It takes a little bit of time, but just make sure you're filling it out as accurately as you can, and it will be beneficial to you. Same with siblings. I just indicated that I had one younger sibling. So this is for colleges to know about you, but I believe that it's not something that is really going to hurt you to fill out, and I would try to fill it out as accurately as you can, just so that they can give you things that are going to appeal not just to you, but also to the family background that you come from. Next is education. So this is a lot about high schools and things like that. Colleges and universities, if you did any dual credit work, you're going to want to fill out this section for sure. Go through step by step and just really think about all the things that you've done. The one I really want to talk about here is honors. So you are going to want to report honors if you have them. However, these should be very broad, very important honors. So something like getting on like the A honor roll at your school is probably not worth making this honors list. As you can see, the only thing I have here is that I was a National Merit Committed student. That's the sort of honors that they're looking for. So if you receive some honor like this, or if you're an AP scholar or something like that, that's something you would want to put here. But something like just being on the superintendent's roll or something like that, you're probably not going to put in the honor section. As you can see, I was a pretty high achieving student and my honor section is very sparse, so don't worry if there's not very much here. You're going to get to go more in depth on your things that you've done and things like this in your essay and in your resume, and that's going to be where this really, really matters. This is just so a college can get kind of an overview of the things that you've been doing. It's the same with community-based organizations. Community-based organizations is just like the fee waiver thing from before. If you aren't sure if a community-based organization is helping you, or you're like, oh, well, my college counselor is helping me, but are they a community-based organization? They're not. If you don't know, if no organization has explicitly communicated to you that you need to put something in this section, you don't. I would just stick with 0 unless you know explicitly that you should have something in this section. Finally, future plans. I would fill this out if you have any idea at all about something you want to do, or even if you don't, because this will help personalize the mail that the colleges send to you. So even if you're undeclared or undecided, I believe you can indicate that, and then they'll talk to you about their program for undecided students. So this is something that is pretty important and I think pretty interesting, just because you get that more personalized sort of information from those colleges when they're emailing you and sending you mail, which they will be doing a lot of. The next thing is the testing section. This is very self-explanatory. You just indicate which tests you want to report. I'm going to talk a little bit here about the way that the ACT and SAT testing reporting works. So I took the SAT test 3 times, and as you can see, it is not here in my score reports, and that is because the equivalent score I got on the ACT was much higher than my SAT score. So I only reported my ACT test, and that's totally fine, and you can totally do that. And then you self-report your ACT score here, and then you're going to separately send that score to your colleges for a small fee through the actual ACT portal. So just reporting your ACT test score here is not enough to actually make sure that the colleges have your score. You have to physically send it to them. But that'll be made clear when you add the college to your My Colleges tab. Finally, activities. So this is a very important tab to fill out. The way I would recommend doing this is I would recommend having a Google Doc, and you answer each of these questions in the Google Doc, and you pay special attention to the word count, make sure the synopses you're writing fits that word count, and then you put them in order in the Google Doc of most important to least important to you. So that's extremely important that you do that, because this is what they're going to be looking at, and they want to see the things that really matter to you first. So for an example, I have here my choir involvement. So I talked about it a little bit. I would always put a position in a leadership description. You have to. So even if you say chamber choir member, or I ended up being my choir president, but that was after I submitted this application, so I couldn't put it on here yet. The activity should be has to fit the word count, so it's going to be very short, and the character count, I'm sorry. So it's going to be very short, and it should be very bare bones. They can learn more about exactly what you did here when you write your essay or in your resume. You're going to want to put your participation, when you participated, hours. You're going to need to know your hours and your weeks for your resume as well, so that's a good thing to be recording now. And unless you are positive, like super, super positive, you do not want to do something like this in college, I would say that you do intend to participate in a similar activity. This just shows to the people looking at your application that you're going to be an involved student and you're interested in being a part of the college community. Finally, writing. So this is where your essay is going to go. This is where you can read the prompts. We'll talk a little bit more about the essay and the things that you should do when it's the essay video. We're going to have a separate video at camp about the essay, but I would note here how close I was to the word count. I had 649 words out of 650 words. You're going to want to be very, very, very close to the word count, exactly like that. Finally, the last thing we're going to look at in this Common App tab is the additional information section. So this is if you want to talk about a big gap in your resume or something that you really, you don't have any volunteer hours and you want to tell them why. I considered doing this because I went to a smaller school. My graduating class was 82, and so I didn't have a ton of opportunities. And I was like, should I talk about that? Should I mention it here? The answer is probably no. Unless there's a really, really big, super, super noticeable gap, you don't need to explain anything here. You should just really talk about the things that you plan on doing for the college in your essay and things like that. This is only if you have something very, very serious happen, like a family member die or something similar. They've added this question about COVID-19, and I would only say that you wish to share anything for that same reason. Don't put anything here if it's not like a family member died or you had to quarantine for 9 months or something like that. This should be only for really, really important, huge gaps that necessitate you have to have an explanation for them. So that is the end of the Common App tab. The next thing we're going to look at is ApplyTexas.
ApplyTexas. So ApplyTexas is very similar to the Common App in a lot of ways. A lot of the logic that I discussed in the Common App section of this video is also going to apply to ApplyTexas. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that are specific to ApplyTexas. One of these is the Texas conservatorship question. So that is very self-explanatory, easy to answer, but it is just a question you should keep an eye out for. The other thing I really want to talk about in this section is indicating your family's gross income. So if you are at all middle class or upper middle class or anything where you don't feel like you're going to get a lot of financial aid or you don't feel like you're really going to need some university assistance in order to pay for college, I would not specify your family's income here. It's optional. You can choose not to do it. And I would not do it because some schools might use it as an excuse to offer you fewer scholarship money, less financial aid. I would just be very wary about indicating your family's income here in the ApplyTexas portal. Okay, so here is another section that is specific to ApplyTexas. It is the residency information section. This is particularly important if you are applying to a public university because it is just to help the university determine if you're going to qualify for resident in-state tuition or if you are going to have to pay out-of-state tuition. So important to fill out, but not particularly confusing. The next thing I wanted to look at was the extracurricular, personal, and volunteer activities. So this is similar to what appears on the Common App. However, it is a little bit different. You don't actually get the chance to really describe the things that you've done. As you see, it's about like one sentence, even shorter than the Common App section. They're going to ask you the level in which you participated, and they're going to ask you if you were elected. So this is a little bit of a tricky section to understand, but for instance, my very first organization I put was chamber choir. So I indicated I was elected for this, and it's not the type of election in that like a body of your peers or your teachers are voting for you, but more of a sort of position that maybe you had to audition for or try out for instance, being on the varsity team. That would be a position that you are technically elected, quote unquote, to do. So that's how the ApplyTexas approaches this section. The other thing you're going to look at is community or volunteer service, which I don't believe Common App has a section for. And so this is your opportunity to highlight some of the volunteer services that you've done. It's okay if a lot of it was with your school, that's totally fine. I would also indicate first, the organization you spent the most time working with, and then second, maybe your most impressive volunteer organization, and then I would just continue the list from there. For talents, honors, and awards, so this is different from the academic awards section on the Common App. This is sort of all awards you've gotten for anything. So you can see here my golf team got 3rd place at regionals, and I indicated that. Anything that could it all qualify as some sort of honor or award, I would go ahead and put it here until you hit the max award count or until you run out of things that you've done. They also have this section for employment, internships, summer activities, if you've even kind of done anything. For instance, I did this FBI Teen Academy for 1 day. It was a 1-day thing, and I've still wrote it down, kept it in my resume, and I've indicated it on this form. Finally, this is the most important ApplyTexas specific section. This is the custom questions. So every school with ApplyTexas will have these custom questions available. So this is the part of the application that's probably going to take the most time. Specifically for UT Austin, I also applied to their honors program, their phase 2 honors program, their plan 2 honors program, which I would definitely recommend if you're interested in UT Austin and you are a high achieving student. I would highly recommend that you look at that and apply to that. But I had to write a lot of additional answers for UT Austin specifically. So be ready to do that. Don't think just because you fill out the application, you're completely done and you've applied to the school. Make sure you are prepared to answer all of these custom college-specific questions. So that was ApplyTexas and the CommonApp. I hope walking through some of the application together gave you guys a good sense for how exactly that's going to work. Once you start adding colleges, specific colleges that you want to go to, you're going to have a couple of those more specific supplemental writing questions and things like that, but the bulk of the CommonApp and ApplyTexas systems is just that sort of personal information section. As always, there are links in the description box with more information about these application systems and just applying to college in general. Thank you guys so much for coming to camp.